Yaakob Abinu was born this week, and in Parashat Toledot, which literally means the parasha of births, literally is what Toledot means, but essentially what that means is generations, that the family is developing. And with Yaakov Abinu's birth is the beginnings of the nation of Israel, because what we know is that later on he will become Israel, and he will father 12 tribes, which will ultimately become the beginnings of the nation. But of course, he's not the only one that is born in this week's parasha. His twin brother is born with him, Esav. And although they are not identical twins, they look different and they certainly act different. The Hachamim say that the beginning of their life, they were very similar, and the way that they engaged was very similar. And although one can very much recognize the differences between Esav and Yaakov, the reality is that they can be quite subtle at times. And twins tend to be very much alike in many ways. And what I'd like to look at this week is one specific difference that is essential with regards to Yaakov and Esav. And it is a difference that makes a huge implication, right, in terms of how it is that they live in the world and what it is that they ultimately choose to do in their lives. But it is subtle, and it requires a bit of attention in terms of understanding it. Now, being that this is a parasha that talks about Toledot, which essentially is generations and the developments of children and their children, we're talking about time. We're talking about how do things play out in the future, and ultimately what is it that they bring at the beginnings, or where it is that they've come from, right? What is the awareness in terms of the previous generations as much as it is an interest in the future generations. And the reality is that Esav and Yaakov have very different ways of relating to time in this way, but more specifically past generations or history, and future generations and what will come for them in terms of the choices of their lives that they make now. Now, Esav, in a very basic and superficial way, can be seen to be interested in nothing but the now. He is all about what's happening now, what's going on in front of him. It is not easy for him to maintain the conscious awareness of all that came before him and all that might come after him, and to make decisions based on that awareness. Yaakov, on the other hand, as his name implies, literally it means the heel or coming from the heel, he is able to take his time. He's able to recognize things might come at the heels of others, right? It may take generations in order for things to be able to actually progress. So, and Esav, his name means that he's ready-made. He's asui. He's just, what's happening now is what's real. And this makes a huge difference, right, in terms of how it is that they relate to the world. So I think it's important for us to pay attention to this. Why? Because this view will be the defining view of the Jewish people. In other words, who it is that takes the mantle here. And remember that this parasha is the parasha of the blessing, the famous or infamous blessing, in which Yitzhak essentially states that he wants to give the blessing, capital B, to Esav. And what is this blessing? This blessing is essentially the bestowing of leadership and responsibility for the furthering of the vision and movement of Abraham Avinu, of Abraham. And that is essentially a covenant with God, a special relationship with God, and the development of a family that will ultimately become a nation in covenant with God. And that requires somebody who's invested in the idea, who really believes that this is what it is that we need to do, and that is sensitive to taking it forward with all of the responsibility and breadth of vision and knowledge that it requires. And interestingly, Yitzhak sees Esav as being this person. And Rivka hears this. She's not okay with it. She definitely thinks that Esav is the wrong person for this. And she's, the mom. She has a good knowledge of her children. And she positions Yaakov to be the one to receive the blessing. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the dynamics of that specific episode in this presentation. I've done it before. And actually, I just did a podcast with some young men and women in the Syrian community. I think that's called the Greatest Parasha Podcast, and I'll put a link for it in the comments or in the notes, of this video, if you want to listen to my discussion on that part of it. But ultimately, Yitzhak sees Esav as the one who should receive this beracha. Rivka sees Yaakov as the one who should receive this beracha. And so much of this has to do with their relationship to Toledot, their relationship to generations. What is Esav's relationship to generations? Well, on the surface, it looks like that Esav does not have a huge amount of interest in terms of the generations past and the generations to come. And what I mean by that is that Esav may recognize it as being an important thing in general for his family, but he has trouble, and that's a generous assertion, he has trouble with being able to maintain it. He has trouble with being able to say, listen, I know that I'm a grandson of Abraham, and that he had a very, very important vision, that he had this tremendous relationship with God, and I want to bring that forward and bring that into the now of my life. Esav does not do that. And he does not also say, and I am interested in being able to see how it is that I can build this forward and bring it into national relevance, right? Obviously, when I say national at this point in history, it's not exactly as what we would in modern times understand as being national, but essentially what it means is that there is enough of a critical mass of people, which would essentially be a familial mass, right? I mean, these are, children and their children and so on, that are self-governing as an entity, right? That they're more than just, living at a home together. They are actually an entity, a population that is self-governing. And Esav's not thinking about any of those things. He has trouble being able to maintain any of that thought in his mind. And that is expressed and manifest in the story at the very beginning of the parasha, in which Yaakov offers to buy the birthright from him, right? Because after all, Esav is the firstborn by a few minutes. And rightfully, he is the one that should be doing all of this stuff. And Yitzhak sees him as being okay to do this. Yaakov, though, similar to his mother, maybe even more so, knows his twin brother very well. I mean, as it is, siblings know each other pretty well, but twins, well, they have a very special bond usually. And Yaakob and Esav know each other very well. And one thing that Yaakov knows about Esav is that Esav cannot hold all of this legacy and future, and possibilities of future in his mind. He isn't interested in those things. And how does this come out? It comes out in the story, because Esav he's in the field, and he comes back after a very rigorous day, it seems, of hunting in the field, and he sees Yaakov making food. And he doesn't even reference the food as to what it is. He sees that it's red food because these are lentils, right? And he sees that Yaakov is making lentils. At least the lentils, in their raw state are red. And he says, give me some of the red stuff. So what that indicates, just on the surface, is that Yaakov is interested in what he sees. He is attracted to what is presented to him in the now. And he says, Hal'iteni na min ha'adom ha'adom hazeh, which means, doesn't mean feed me, right? I mean, it literally means like, pour it down my throat. I want to consume it, essentially is what he's saying. And Yaakov sees this as an important opportunity because he's already concerned, right? He recognizes that his brother is absolutely not committed to the future of the people, right? He's not committed to the future of Abraham's vision, and he's not particularly committed to the past. That's why beautifully the Hachamim say here, like they tease this out, and they say, well, why is Yaakov sitting and making lentils? And they say, well, Abraham died. And this was the mourning period of Abraham Avinu. And these lentils were the meal for the mourners. And the significance of that is completely lost on Esav. All Esav sees is not a meal filled with meaning of legacy and future, a transitionary time, right? Which is so much implicated in the very name of the parasha, Toledot, generations. He just wants lunch because he's hungry. And that's all that matters to him. And it's at this juncture that Yaakov sees Esav is so detached from all of the meaning that comes with the history and future of who we are. And all he's interested in is in satiating his appetite right now. And I think that he would be so interested in satiating his appetite and so uninterested in why it is that I'm even making this food that he would sell me his birthright. And so Yaakov Avinu offers to sell him the birthright. Yaakov Avinu offers to buy the birthright from him. And Esav's response is extremely telling, because what Esav says is, Hineh anochi holech lamut, u'ma li ze bechora. He says, I'm about to die. What meaning, right? Ma li ze, why do I need to have a bechora? What does it matter to me that I have a birthright? And one would think, the better response might be, Yaakov, I'm dying of hunger here. Can we talk about this later? Is it really relevant to start discussing a bechorah now? But that's not what he says. He says, I'm about to die. Here I'm sitting here ready to die. What do I need a bechorah for? What does it matter? Right? It's so irrelevant. And that language is extremely telling. And the Hachamim broaden that. They deepen it. And they say that when Yaakov says, Hineh anochi holech lamut, essentially, what I'm about to die, what he's essentially saying is, Yaakov, I'm going to be dead in a box after whatever years I have in this life. I'm not interested in a bechorah. I'm interested in my life. I'm interested in what it is that I'm living for now. And it's interesting because later in the Nebi'im, the motto of Edom is Achol v'shato ki nahar namut. Eat, drink, because tomorrow we die. And that is a theme of the people, right? And that's essentially saying, carpe diem, seize the day. And so he's expressing his philosophy to Yaakov in this setting. And he's saying, I don't understand you. I don't even see what it is that you're talking about. To me, it's a matter of what it is that is needed now in the moment. Now, that may seem very superficial, but I do want to give Esav a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. And why do I want to do that? Because after all, his parents are Yitzhak and Rivka. His grandparents are Abraham and Sarah. And Esav, if not in the most conscious level, has a sense of something. And that is that he has a point. On an existential level, right, in terms of, the ontological reality of things, how things exist, there is nothing more than what is present. The past doesn't exist before us. It exists only in terms of memory. Perhaps it exists in terms of what it is that it has made me into right now, but it isn't here now. And the fact that it isn't here now means that it doesn't really have a place in reality. And if you want to talk about future, well, it hasn't happened yet. It's not there. All that there is what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is that I am starving and I'm asking you for some food, and you're sitting here talking to me about some lofty ideas that, have to do with past and future. And that's what Esav is saying. And on a purely existential level, he has quite a point, because he's right. And he's even further, there's even a deeper way to kind of look at it, to recognize that there's not even the present, right? There's neither past nor future nor present. I mean, as I am talking, the present is passing me by. As you are listening to this, the present is passing you by. There is no present. I mean, all there is what was and what will be, and it's moving into the other, right? It is ever increasingly, well, not increasingly, but continuously moving one into the other. Right? My past is moving into the future, is moving into the future, is moving to the future, is moving to the future, and I'm losing my past, losing my past, losing my past, and I don't really have a present. So what I'm living is past future, really, right? And Esav realizes that. And that is where he lives. And that's very real. And it is possible that Yitzhak Avinu sees that because of that, Esav lives very vibrantly in the now. And there's something charged about that, right? There's something that is strong about that. Because how many of us don't do that? Right? How many of us are either worried about the past or worried about the future? Live in the past or live in the worries and the concerns of the future. How many of us are not here now? But Esav is. And he says to Yaakov essentially, look, you can talk to me about Grandpa Abraham all you want, and you can talk to me about the birthright and the future of the people all you want, but right now, this is my circumstance, and it needs to be addressed. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is that as far as Yaakov Abinu was concerned, and in terms of Abraham Abinu, there was more than just what is now. There was a sense of what it says in Bereshit, that God had completed the heavens and the earth and everything in it. And what that means is that everything is done. And that means that past, present, future is hard to grasp because it's almost as though it's an illusion for us to be able to move through what actually is, when on a certain level, perhaps on the God level, and as it is presented in Bereshit, everything just is. Past is, future is, present is. It all is done, as it says in the Torah. And what we are doing is essentially moving through it. And so while the past and the future may not be at the real moment right now, it all exists on some level. And that is very Jewish, right? That is the Jewish view. We recognize that on another level of reality, everything just is. And we are moving through the extant vision, the extant reality of creation. Now, I know that may be a bit of a bender, right, to think about, but that's how the Torah presents it. And it's how Abraham saw it, because Abraham saw it through essentially the frame of God. That's how Yaakov took it. And he recognized that ultimately the life that we are living is the creation in real time of all that has ultimately been done and been achieved. And so for Yaakov Abinu, past and present and future are all one. And that it's important for us to be able to recognize that it's all one. And that the past informs the future, and vice versa. And that is why for us, we open every single prayer saying, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, our earliest past as a people, is with us every single day. It is in our mind every single day. The Torah speaks to us of where it is that we came from, and it is something that we're meant to have in our mind and our hearts every single hour. And at the same time, we look forward towards Mashiach. We look forward towards a story that has not ended, a story that is ever unfolding. We have this hope, this tikvah, right? Kaveh l'Adonai chazak v'yametz lebecha. Have this hope in God. Constantly strengthen your heart, because you know that there is a story that you are living that is ever unfolding. And that the Jewish mind and the Jewish heart, although of course it lives consciously and present in the now, because that is what's real right now, and that is what is happening for us right now, it lives in it with a constant awareness of what was in the past and ultimately what is in the future for us, because we recognize that on a certain level it just is. It all lives together as one pristine, beautiful picture. And that our living is the living in the creation of that in real time. Now, I understand that this brings out, questions of, well, if everything already is, then what kind of free choice do we have, and how do we move with all of that? And that is something that is a good question, and it's something that we have to deal with, perhaps in a deeper shiur. But I simply present here the thoughts about how it is that we relate to things, and the Jewish way of relating to things is very different than the way that Esav relates to it, because Esav cannot live in the moment and maintain the past and future in his mind. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is because the present is too enticing for him. The present draws too much to him, that all he wants really is what's going on now. And he doesn't want to have the weight of past and future, because the truth of the matter is, in a certain way, it is a weight. It's a weight of honor. It's a weight of a crown on your head. But it's a weight that Esav just simply was not willing to be able to hold. And that weight is a weight that the Jewish people, as a people, have held, do hold, continue to hold, knowing that our greatness as a people is our history and everything that we've been through. And our greatness as a people will be our commitment to future and continuous living. And that is the Am Yisrael Chai. The Am Yisrael Chai is not just we're living alive today. We continuously live because we recognize the whole of reality, the whole of past and future as being the very world in which we live as extant realities. And that all we're doing is moving through it as opposed to it passing by us. And that is why, for example, the commitment to Israel, to the land itself, is the way that it is for us. Because people would have us forget our history. People would have us forget where we came from. People would have us forget that no matter how far you dig in that land, everything that you find has our name written all over it. People would have us forget that it is the place in which our people was developed, grew, and established ourselves for generations. And that we've come home to it, and that it is our home, and that the way that we think of it is an unfolding of biblical proportions. That is the way that the Jewish people think of these things. We don't look at them simply locally as political issues and what's happening now. Of course, we have to respond to the now in a very meaningful and conscious way. But for the Jewish people, this is an unfolding of biblical proportions. And it is a future that is in our hearts. And that's why I think it's so beautiful that the national anthem of the Jewish people in that land is Hatikva, the hope. And it is a hope, as we say, Bat Shenot Alpayim. It's a 2,000-year-old hope. And if the people lived as Esav did, if the people lived only thinking about what's going on now and giving in to what is presenting itself to us now, we would never live through what we've lived through for the last 3,000 years. We would never live through what we lived through from Abraham, which is 4,000 years. We wouldn't have the tremendous strength of knowing that we will be here for another 1,000 years. And that is the meaning of Am Yisrael Chai. And it is uniquely Jewish. It is a challenge not to get wrapped up in the vision of Esav. And the Chachamim say, interestingly, that the West essentially is the legacy of Esav. And it's one of the reasons why in the West, the here and now is so enticing, that we want things to be done instantly, and the quicker things could be done, the better, and that we want to be able to do what it is that comes before us and, seize the day. And the West has a very, very difficult time with memory and history, and also has a very difficult time with looking into the deep future. The Jewish people have always held that, and the ones amongst us that struggle with that, and there's, all of us do on one level or another, we find it difficult to be able to hold 3,000 years of history. We find it even more difficult to recognize that the future is unfolding in light of that history, that we came back to the land after 2,000 years of being exiled on it. That's pretty staggering. And yet it fits with this story that was predicted 3,000 years ago and still is unfolding in that way for us today in real time. It's a powerful story, but it's a story that only lives and functions in the tremendous sensitivity and embrace of all that the past and future brings to the moment now. That is the Jewish way of thinking. May we see a successful and bright future for the people, and may we live to see its successes continue. I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, and please do like and subscribe so we can spread the Divrei Torah, and all the best.